Welcome to the MerryBody Online Summit, and we are beyond excited to be here today with our good friend and clinical psychologist Miriam Emad. And I said good friend, I should be like best friend. We absolutely love Miriam. I don't know why that word came out, but seriously, good is so bland. Amazing, magical, visionary friend. How are you?
Thank you, Carla. I'm very well. How are you? Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Oh my gosh, but it's all true. And I guess, I feel like we could literally record every single coffee catch-up we have with Miriam, because the conversation is never dull, never surface level. We always dive deep. It's like, whoa, if anyone was here listening, they'd be like, what the hell?
We should do that.
We really should. We should record those.
We enjoy our chats.
We do. And I mean, we could ask you a bazillion questions about a bazillion things, because Miriam helps so many people through so many, I guess, what do you call them? They're not issues, but just
Difficulties,
challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Life.
Yeah, life.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
It's so nice to have someone to support you on life. And I feel like that's what you do.
Complicated.
Yes. So I want to talk to you today, though, about body image.
Yeah. And I mean, for both of us, this has been a really big part of our lives, a negative relationship with our bodies. I mean, this is the backbone of MerryBody and why we created it. So we love it from your perspective. And my first question is, why is this such a thing in today's age? Why does this really impact women especially?
Yeah.
Where does it all begin?
So the foundations of where the starting point of kind of unhealthy relationships with food actually started around between the 13th and the 16th century. So it's a long time ago now.
Wow.
And it actually, there may have been foundations of it prior to that, but the first documented start to self-restriction and self-starvation was around the Christian hermits, who actually started to do some research around purity and self-restriction in that term in a spiritual way. So what they did was they believed that to deprive oneself was a self-sacrificial way of preserving themselves for the holiness, to be holy. And it's interesting because it kind of migrated from that because at straight up from the get-go there were sex differences where women tended to be more in line with that behaviour, because in the medieval times there was obviously a lot of frugality, there was not a lot of resources, so women used to deprive themselves to also be able to provide for their families.
Wow.
So from the get-go there was a spiritual component to it, where people thought in order to be holy and pure they needed to deprive themselves, and a lot of the time it was around food and around luxury. And then there was another component as well where, because everyone was so under-resourced at the time, there was a lot of self-deprivation around food. It sort of migrated from that again, probably around the mid-18th century, where all of a sudden the industrialization happened, women started to go to work, to go to labour, and being darker skinned and more muscly was associated with labour and work.
Wow.
So to be frail and pale became a upper class statement.
Wow.
And that's kind of where it started.
Well, I mean, you even think about the corsets that they
Yes,
would wear.
that's
so
exactly
it's
right.
Make the waist smaller.
Yeah.
Don't worry about breathing. Don't
That's
worry about
right.
those ribs. Just crack a fruit a
That's
few. It's
right.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous now.
Yep.
But we can really look at today's trends as well.
That's
And
right.
see them as actually completely ridiculous.
Yeah, there became this real cultural idealization of thinness from that point, because it started to become an upper class statement. So women started to strive to be, frail and pale, and then it sort of migrated to different things now. But that's kind of the essence of where it started. So we're talking about the 13th century when the first evidence of that kind of came up, and you can imagine how long it's been going on for. Culturally now, thinness is something that is so idolized. We're bombarded with images of, frail models and that sort of stuff. And it becomes significantly more ingrained when you have so much exposure to that content.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't have to look far at all,
That's
do
right.
we?
That's right, yeah.
Open up Instagram, open up Facebook,
That's
open up
right.
a magazine.
Yeah, that's right. Everywhere.
Yeah,
Everywhere you
it's
look.
all there.
Yeah.
And so because we're looking at it a lot, we
Yep.
think that it's right? Or
That's right. I mean, we have significantly more access to this material now, especially with, like you mentioned, with Instagram and magazines and everywhere you kind of look. And it's very human to kind of go, where do I belong? Where do I fit in this sort of spectrum? So comparisons occur as a very natural byproduct of that. There are, of course, biological and environmental factors that contribute to the development of that being a disordered concept. But it would be safe to say that there's not probably a single person that hasn't at some point compared themselves to an image that they've seen or had thought something around, I don't look like that, and this is what I see a lot of.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, I think it's a cool thing, to point out some good. I think 2019 to 2020, we are seeing so much more diversity online. I mean, celebrating color, celebrating ability and disabilities. We're seeing more of this, and shape and size and everything. But it's we have to consciously choose to follow that or to read those types of magazines. But it's great that it is beginning to rise. Will that help, do you think, a lot?
I hope so. It's beginning to rise, and in a sense, the only sort of difficulty I have around that is it's become an intentional thing to have normal bodies represented, and there's a significant problem with that it needs to be intentional that a normal body is represented in the media, because normal bodies are normal bodies. They're just bodies, right?
So without that ulterior motive behind
That's right.
it. So it's we're going to be
inclusive,
It's
right?
inclusive, So I better show X, Y, Z.
It's do we have enough female compared to male? It's it kind of takes away that, actually, no, we're just celebrating the difference. It's no, we're forcing it. But I guess it's a stepping stone in a way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the idea, I suppose. I hope that it goes from being something intentional to start with into being something that perhaps is a little bit more fluid and normalized in the future.
I mean, I am sometimes shocked by it, which is not shocked in a bad way. It's more surprised. It's oh, that's different.
Because you're not used to it.
I'm not used to seeing it. And then
That's
I'm
right.
this is the best. And so hopefully that surprise goes away and then it becomes more common.
Absolutely.
So we talked about comparison. So that's a very, I guess, common thing that we would do to create body image, or what is it when you're just very conscious of what your body looks like. What are some other things that we can try and become aware of when we're doing it, which is then encouraging that I hate to say negative, but it is. It's that not so good relationship with our bodies.
Well, one of the first things, and I'm actually really glad you labelled it as negative, Carla, because there is this movement into positivity and positive self-talk and positive this, which is wonderful as well. The only thing is, if we can be positive, we can be negative, right? So there's an oscillation on either side. And what's more important is, instead of labeling ourselves as good and bad, so I am good or I am bad, rather the movement is, or can be more helpful if it's more towards I am. I just am. I exist, right? I am. And that is so important. And it's so important, because typically if we try and convert something that is so harsh and so ingrained and so cruel and punitive into something that is completely opposite, it means it's got the capacity to kind of oscillate back to that space. And if we just keep it as non-judgmental and non-labeled as possible, then we are sitting in that beautiful space in the middle.
Oh, it's so yoga.
It absolutely is. And the idea behind it is, I don't have to love it to accept it. So the movement towards this self-love is really beautiful, but for a lot of people, it's such a far cry from where they are at the moment.
I remember when I first read about that, look in the mirror and say, I love myself. I'm but I don't, and I just can't, I simply cannot, and it felt really yuck, and it felt like a lie. So it was I was saying this, and I get it, fake it till you make it, but I think this is a nice place to begin on our self-acceptance path. It's here I am. This is me.
I love this. I don't have to love myself love that part of me in order for it to be normal, okay,
Absolutely.
enough.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And if we
beautiful.
think about it's so interesting how we kind of do that, have that narrative towards ourselves. Because if you think about the people we love, are there annoying things about them?
Yes.
Of course.
Absolutely. Every single human will have a spectrum of qualities.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And do we accept all of them for the
Yeah.
ones that, continue to be in our lives? We absolutely do.
Yeah.
We don't have to love it or like it necessarily to
Yeah.
accept it. Accept it is simply that space where we kind of go, it is.
Yeah.
Right? It is
Yeah.
neither this nor that nor anything else.
Yeah.
It just is, in the same way that I am and you are. And if we can try and sit in that space as much as possible, it creates less of a pressure on either side to either be punitive, to push ourselves, or to be positive, to make ourselves feel
Yeah.
better. You just kind of sit in a, I guess, more balanced space
Yeah.
in between.
Well, I guess it's that term as well, body neutrality.
That's
So
right.
it's like just like having this awareness of, yeah, here's my body and it does these amazing things for me. It moves, takes me on life's journey. But that's what
Absolutely.
that's why it's here.
Yeah.
To do life.
Absolutely, and I really like that, because the focus moves from how does my body look to how does it
Yes.
work?
Yeah.
Is it doing
And how does
what
it
it's meant to do?
feel?
That's right.
Am
How
I
does
in
my body
pain,
feel?
or like do I feel like
That's right.
I can do this in like with ease?
Yes,
Like, can I
that's
stand
absolutely
tall with
right.
ease, or
Yeah.
do I feel like my back hurts? I want to be able to feel like my body works
Yep.
really well, and when
Yeah.
it does, I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, and works within the capacity of your ability, right? So does it take me from A to B? Can I make it do the basic things?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we need to go a little bit more, rather than how does my body look, is what is my body doing?
Yeah.
Is it doing
Yeah,
its job
it's like
for me?
celebrating our bodies in another way, not just by, the Instagram photo or
Yeah,
the
that's right.
photo,
Yeah.
what we appear to be like. It's like, no, celebrate it for what it does for us.
That's right.
How can we work out if we like what our relationship is like with our body?
Well, the first thing you want to kind of catch there is the labeling and the self-talk, right? So much like we said earlier, if I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and this is just one example, I'm not sure why I would be standing there looking at myself in the mirror, but I'm sure people do. Instead of right, yeah, right.
I'm like, oh, there I is.
Oh yeah, there I am.
But what I used to
Yeah.
do was,
That's
like
the big
grab
one.
that,
That's the
grab
big
this.
one.
I'd be like, oh my arm.
Every
That's-
morning I would, my morning ritual
Yeah.
is a great morning ritual.
Yeah.
I'm being kidding, guys. I would go to the mirror, I would lift up my pajama top and be like, why is my stomach not smaller today?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I
Yeah.
mean. It's kind of that. It's almost like that ritualized behavior
Yeah.
around body checking and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Wow.
Like every morning, every
Yeah.
time you look in a mirror, I would do that.
So
every time.
body checking.
That's right. So body checking is actually something that is typically diagnostic of further difficulties when we look at eating disorders and things like that. So body checking is one of the first things that we catch in that process when we're looking at a diagnosis. The important part around that is typically if we are attending to ourselves in some way in the mirror or whatever, we're usually saying this is lumpy, this looks like this is bigger than I would like it to be. And these are all labels, right? Because the first point of judgment is good or bad or I like or dislike. So even when I say something's lovely, I'm still judging it as lovely, right? And the idea, if we can kind of just pull it back again to that sense of acceptance where I don't have to like it to accept it, and I just call it for what it is. It's a knee, it's a toe, it's a leg, it's a thigh.
Yeah.
It's not a bad leg.
Wow.
How can there be a bad leg,
It's
right?
just a leg.
It's a leg,
Yeah.
right? Just as food is just food, and
Yeah.
our arms are just our arms. And the idea of kind of checking and catching those labels, the sooner we attend to it, the more we're going to notice how much we actually have that internal narrative around I like this, I don't like this. And if your body's too much to kind of start there, then just catching it externally first, things like I like or dislike the weather, or catching those sort of judgments first, and then taking it from there.
And with that, is the goal to not have any judgment? Like, I mean, is that what we should strive for? Or maybe should isn't the wrong word. Just be aware of and then notice.
Well, it depends on whether it hurts you or helps you. So if my judgments are kind of hindering my capacity to engage and participate in life as I would like to, then that may be an area that I really have to look at.
Yeah.
Like an example would be like if my judgment of my body is like I'm too fat, it stops me from saying yes to going to the beach.
That's right.
And so instead I stay at home and I get sad that I'm not at the beach, or I get sad that I feel that way about my body.
And the one with the weather, we should do that too. Like, if I hate the rain, if I get really, really sad and never want to leave the house, like that might be something to work on. Whereas, like, I really love summer and I do prefer sunny days, but I don't get sad on rainy days.
That's exactly
so that's
right.
okay.
That's absolutely. And
We relish in the rainy days.
And like, this is fun. I can just stay home and like not be outside.
That's right. And that's kind of the idea is how do I approach the things I maybe don't prefer? Because I can say something is helpful or unhelpful. I can say this is comfortable or uncomfortable. But when it starts to go under these banners of bad, problematic, too big, too fat, too whatever, we kind of, then it starts to have a little bit more attached to it. We kind of attribute meaning to something that is completely outside of us, and then it can be a problem.
This is,
I know, that's good. I love
that.
that.
Amazing
so
practice that we can all welcome into our lives.
Absolutely.
What about if we are doing this practice and we're noticing, oh my gosh, I do this all the time. I'm the worst human ever. Like, I suck. I'm not good enough. Like, I'm so not far with my progress, and we start to then be mean to ourselves about how bad we are at this.
Well, this is where it comes in, right? You judge yourself, and then you judge your judging, and then we keep judging, and then we judge some more.
And you judge your.
That's right.
Like, you're trying to make a change and then you suck at it.
Yeah.
And it's just judging.
And then you judge
and then you judge that. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of where it is at any point. If you can catch it at any point, it's really helpful, because sometimes we do judge ourselves, and then we catch that we judged ourselves, and then we judge ourselves for judging ourselves, and then now we're stuck in like this really big judgmental cycle. And at any point, if at any point we can kind of just capture that and go, oh, okay, yeah, I've really traveled that road, haven't I? And just bring it back. Okay, well, how can I just bring it back to observing? And the easiest way to, it's easy in theory. It's tricky when we go to practice it, but practicing it on things that are outside of you first makes it a lot easier. But if I was, for instance, to say, my hand or something. So if we just put our hand out and just looked at your hand, right? How hard is it to just look at your hand without labeling it as a hand, right? You kind of want to go hand, right? Yeah. So the first process of observing is actually removing that running commentary, because as humans, we are primed to have running commentary. Comes from our primal days. Really helpful if there was a tiger. I don't want to go and explore it and be like, oh, that looks like a fluffy cat. I want to run in the opposite direction real quick, right? So it's really hard to actually just look at something and just observe it without attaching any labels to it. But if I was to ask you to kind of go a step further and actually just describe the hand, so just describe it using your 5 senses, using just what you can see maybe to start with.
Oh, wow, okay. So there's like a square, kind of oblong shape with like 5 long things coming on it. Yeah. And they have weird circles like in the
weird
middle of
is
them.
a judgment.
They have grooves.
Yes, they have grooves. That's right. Yeah.
And then they have other squares on the tips.
Yeah.
Is a square a judgment?
No, that's a shape. That's a shape.
That's a description.
Absolutely, that's a description.
Yeah, okay. And then there's a clear bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a wide tip. Yeah. And
they bend.
And there's some metal
on it
with some pearls.
Yeah, we can call it a ring. That's cool.
A ring. Okay, we're allowed to call it a ring.
But that's sort of the idea, right? Is if I just look at what I'm looking at, I observe it and describe it using just the facts that I've got, then it removes this interpretation of like, oh, my hands look wrinkly, they look old, they look this.
Oh my God.
It removes that judgment.
Weird.
Absolutely. Weird.
That's exactly
you
right.
do have no. So you sort of catch those as they come up. You catch those labels as they come up. So if we can just focus on observing and describing,
Yes.
and as we catch a judgment, we just go, oh, that was a judgment, and we just put it aside. So instead of judging ourselves for making that judgment, we just actually put it aside and go, let me just go back to
Wow.
observing and describing.
I love this.
Without going into I like or I don't like, or it looks like this or looks like that. So it's focusing more on the facts can be a really lovely space.
Yeah,
Oh my
I mean,
God,
it's quite
this is
similar
amazing.
to a meditation practice of noticing the thoughts.
Absolutely.
So would that be something that would help you like
Beautiful.
should I say better? Because that's a judgment.
We're going to catch every judgment now.
progress?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, move through this. Yeah.
Absolutely right. So meditation is a really beautiful space because it creates that spaciousness between your emotion and your action, spaciousness between your thoughts and your action, spaciousness between your thoughts and your emotion, because they're all kind of emotions, thoughts and actions are all interrelated with each other, and they all impact each other in such a significant way. So meditation allows a space for self-reflection, right?
Yeah.
Which means that if we are trying to improve in the area of self-judgment, then allowing the space for self-reflection means that I can kind of go, okay, well, I'm giving myself space to notice that, as opposed to while I'm at work on my computer and then the judgments are just like a running commentary, and there's not a lot of space to be able to access them and catch them.
Yeah. Oh
so
my gosh.
meditation is really lovely in that way.
And such a nice action step we can all take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to sit
Like
and meditate.
2 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Is like we don't need to be like it's a 30-minute practice.
Well, I mean, that
Yeah.
makes it so doable. I mean, as soon as I said I can just meditate for 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And that's all I need. It's not 20 minutes twice a day. Like, let's just start with 5.
Yep.
It was able to become part of my day, right?
right.
And it's
Absolutely.
like, that's where we want to begin. And it's amazing what 5 minutes of sitting and breathing, and
That's right.
whether you're listening to a guided meditation or just lovely music, it's amazing what that does.
Absolutely.
Gosh.
It's about creating space, which is a beautiful description of what
Yeah.
you just described.
And like not reacting and like being angry and like just stewing. Oh my gosh, meditation.
So amazing. I think what I love
Absolutely.
most about this conversation is this practice of observing and releasing those judgments of how we would normally talk to ourselves or think about ourselves or even think about everything.
Yep.
It's like it's not just about body image. Like this can then be transferred to everything.
Absolutely it can. And that's sort of the idea when we remove the judgment and we're just observing and describing what our surroundings are and what's happening inside, outside, our body, so on and so forth. What ends up happening is we reduce the likelihood of interpreting our world through a particular lens, right? Because if I'm just observing and describing what I see, what I hear, what I smell, what my experience is, and I'm just focusing as much as I can on the facts, then I'm not interpreting it through the lens of my previous trauma or through the lens of my how I woke up or through the lens of anything. I'm doing my best to actually just touch base with my reality as it is.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so helpful. That's that's amazing.
This is really the art of presence as well.
Absolutely.
Like that's being fully present, like noticing everything and showing up as if it was the first time you were showing up.
That's right.
Like today is this day and it will never happen exactly as it's going to happen today.
And it never does.
And like releasing expectations as well of like other people and yourself.
Absolutely, and that's a lot of the time where the pain comes from, right? Is when I'm not accepting my reality as it is. So we want to accept it as it is, not as we think it should be. And that discrepancy between what it is and what we think it should be can create a lot of suffering, right?
Yes.
So touching base with our reality as it is can kind of create that sense of like, well, this is what it is for now. It doesn't mean that it's forever. It doesn't mean that it's never going to change. It just means that for now, what am I actually reacting to? Am I reacting to my reality as it is or to what I wanted it to be?
Oh my God.
Wow.
And that's really important when we're sort of touching base with our emotions as well.
So and it's acceptance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Acceptance of reality.
You don't have to love it to accept it.
Yeah.
That's right.
How
You can
good is
accept it
this?
for what it is.
I love this.
Yeah, so
Oh
it's
my
really
God.
You have to
important.
love it to
That's
accept
right.
it.
It's so crucial.
And
I
then we
think.
take
So
that
powerful.
step.
It
Oh.
is. Yeah.
Oh, I have loved this discussion and this chat and so many action steps and things that I think we can just welcome in, little mindset switches to welcome in that peace.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's like a new perspective on something,
Yeah.
right? It's like a new way to see something that we've been looking at, and maybe that's been causing suffering.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's like the veil was just lifted.
Amazing.
I'm so pleased.
You are amazing. If there was one mantra that you're living by at this moment in your life, what would it be?
My goodness, there's a couple. I think that probably exact what I said numerous times before, I am. So I am is maybe the one that's most prominent at the moment. I don't have to love it to accept it comes up a lot for me because
Yes.
we come across so many roadblocks and it's kind of like, you know, and it's really easy to kind of get caught in that, and then we are reacting to the reality that we want, not where we are right now. So we procrastinate and we avoid and we do all sorts of things. So that's something that comes up for me a lot in terms of I don't have to like it, I have to accept it and figure out what to do. But I am is a really powerful one for me at the moment because it keeps me kind of centered in between the my identity that's here and my relationships that are there and my job that's here and this and that, and I am just keeps me at the center of that because at the end of the day, you know, there's a bag of bones covered in a thing of skin and I'm like just traveling through life like that. It's really fabulous just as it is. I don't need to kind of judge it any further or do anything more with it.
Wow.
Yes.
How empowering.
It's cool.
Amazing.
Oh, and two last questions.
Yes. absolutely.
What is a book that you would recommend, or one of your favorite books?
Oh wow.
I know you love a lot.
I do.
So this is, I know I should have pre-asked you. Because
But maybe this is, it's like, but maybe it's like the book right now.
Yes.
It's like,
the book I'm rereading at the moment is Big Magic. So,
Oh, I love that book.
so I've just
She's amazing.
reread it.
By Elizabeth Gilbert.
I'd love to maybe have a bit more of a think about that and send in a list. Would that be okay?
my
Because
gosh,
there's a couple I would love to.
Please.
Yeah, that would be
Miriam's
awesome.
book list.
I love
I'd
it.
love
I'm
that.
gonna read them all.
Yeah,
reading
that's
list of
lovely.
2020.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. And then we can have a book club.
Yeah.
It's done and scheduled in. And if all of our viewers want to find more information about you, what should they do?
So at the moment, this is prompting me to get working on my website. That will happen at some point. So if anyone wants to get in touch or find out a little bit more about how therapy works, or maybe therapy recommendations for someone in your area, if it's something that you're interested in, then you can just email me on my email address. So it's Miriam, MIRIAM.EMAD.psych, PSYCH, at gmail.com.
Thank you, and we will pop that email address into the notes on the page, so make sure you do get in touch with Miriam if you want any more information. This has been amazing.
Yeah, it's been so lovely. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me
Oh my
on.
Oh,
gosh,
we're so
we're
grateful
so
for your
grateful.
time and your magic and all
Knowledge.
and just
Thank
like
you. That's
I
really
loved
special.
every single bit of that.
Just making it doable and not scary.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. It has been such a pleasure to be here with you, and also you, Miriam. We're so grateful. And we'll see you guys super soon. Bye.